On today's episode, we welcome back to Breakpoint two very special guests to discuss the future of pro coding on the platform, Xanadu and beyond.
Welcome to Breakpoint, the ServiceNow Developer Podcast.
Hello, ServiceNow admins, builders, developers, and curious individuals, which I say with the utmost love and respect. Welcome to, or welcome back to the Breakpoint Podcast, the ServiceNow Developer Podcast, where we bring you all the latest tools, tips, and tradecraft to accelerate your career. I'm your host, Senior Developer Advocate Lauren McManaman, and I am thrilled today to be joined by not one, but two phenomenal guests. So please welcome back to the show the dynamic duo that are the brains behind literally all of the codable aspects of the ServiceNow platform, Patrick Wilson and Jay Couture. How are y'all today?
Doing well. Thanks for having us back, Lauren. We're thrilled to be here back on the pod with you and chatting about some of our favorite things, which is our new exciting developer tools.
Excited to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you back. You guys have been booked and busy for a lot of the developer advocate content. We'll kind of circle back to that later. And as some frequent flyers, you've been on the show a couple of times now. I'm not going to ask you the exact same introductory questions we kind of hit all of our first timers, but I will ask you on a personal side, how are things? How is the Xanadu launch going? Any other big life changes? I say with no background information into what those life changes are.
Xanadu's going great. Right around the same time that we were putting Xanadu out, I found out that I've got a baby girl coming. So we're super excited about that over here. Yeah, all is good.
Two big launches.
Two big new major product launches. Yeah, that's right.
How exciting. Congratulations, Patrick. That's so awesome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're stoked.
Yeah, super excited for Patrick. Nothing quite that exciting here, except I guess Patrick and I have our own equivalent there in the Xanadu release. The ServiceNow IDE launched in GA, so we're very excited to chat about that.
Yeah.
Well, I am pumped to dig into that. Also, just wanted to highlight as well, we are still in the midst of our Xanadu release season. Please check out devlink.sn/Xanadu for a full calendar of all the content that we've dug into, because obviously in the Breakpoint podcast, we'll be kind of dissecting these things at more of a philosophical level. But if you'd like to see them in motion, heavy demo-oriented content, be sure to check out our live streams as well. Now, let's kind of dive straight into today's topic. Now, like you said in the intro, you guys helm up all of the codable aspects of the ServiceNow platform, which is a set that is seemingly growing by the release, which is very, very exciting to see. But this comes in a lot of different forms. But most recently, especially with Washington, the focus has been the ServiceNow SDK and the ServiceNow IDE. Lots of acronyms, lots of fun things. So let's clear the slate and start off just with some basics for any new listeners. What is an IDE? What is an SDK? And how do they play into a developer's overall toolkit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So and those are our two main new application authoring technologies that we've been working on. The SDK we shipped first in Washington, with the IDE coming that came in Xanadu. Quick overview of terms. I'll start with the SDK. So SDK, for those that don't have experience with it, stands for Software Development Kit. So this is a ServiceNow Software Development Kit. And what it is it's a command line tool that basically acts as a little build system for building and writing ServiceNow apps. It's actually really simple. The way it works is it takes as input a project of code, like a bunch of directories with files inside of them that contain a bunch of JavaScript and a bunch of Fluent code. And we'll get into Fluent a little bit here. I'm sure we'll talk about Fluent. But and it takes all of that code that you wrote, it packages it up through a build process into an installable artifact that you can install into a ServiceNow instance. So sort of like a compiler. If you have experience with like a C compiler or something like that, kind of works the same way. And that runs in, it can run in a command line. It can run in a CI/CD pipeline. It can run in all sorts of places because it's just a lightweight little program that runs wherever you tell it to run. So that's the ServiceNow SDK. That's kind of the the guts of this new developer platform that we've been working on.
And a much different paradigm compared to how people have built apps in the past, right? Like everything primarily beforehand was done using builders or wizards or whatever you want to call them. There are codable aspects on ServiceNow, but it was still done in the paradigm of the ServiceNow platform. This completely abstracts away and makes it like even much more flexible.
Yeah, and I would say to that, it's very new for ServiceNow app development, very not new for general software development, right? Which is part of the point. Like part of what we're trying to do with the SDK and with the IDE is bring in more, you could say like modern development practices or standardized development practices that if you are a JavaScript developer or a Python developer, whatever, and you're working on in other ecosystems, building applications for other types of environments, other types of platforms. Why you do that, I have no idea, but people do it. And we're bringing those kind of practices into ServiceNow app development, making it feel more kind of similar. So the SDK new for ServiceNow, but for programmers listening, software developers listening who have been doing this professionally in other environments, it'll feel very, very familiar.
Awesome. Or even I think this has so much also use for people even graduating college, right? Like so much of the computer science degree is just based off of like how to learn codable aspects and learning how to code, right?
Right.
And so having that be more seamlessly transitioned into a ServiceNow career or platform developer career, it's very exciting. So there's not that big jump in between of like, not only do I have to learn the APIs for ServiceNow, but also all the other entities as well. So how exciting. And kind of go into what is the IDE's purpose as well.
Yeah, that's a good transition, actually, talking about, folks maybe coming into the ServiceNow ecosystem for the first time. So IDE, again, define the term. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. An IDE in programmer language is a tool that you use to build applications in one big integrated environment. Hence, that's the I, right? And it brings with it authoring capabilities, static code analysis to tell you if the code you're writing is good or not, or functional or not. Comes with it, tools for managing source control integration and other types of helpful extensions that help streamline your development. There are lots of IDEs out there in the world. This is tools like IntelliJ, Eclipse, WebStorm, whatever. And VS Code is a very popular IDE for doing JavaScript development. Now, what the ServiceNow IDE is we've taken VS Code and we've put it onto the ServiceNow instance and integrated it with the ServiceNow instance so that you get a bunch of goodies and extensions and things that you couldn't have in like a local development workflow. And the intention with the IDE is it's like an on Rails, easy to set up, easy to bootstrap, but also fully featured development environment directly on your instance. So you could use the SDK for doing like local app development on your own development machine. like on my MacBook, I could just run the SDK and run whatever tooling I want and deploy into a ServiceNow instance from there. Or if I don't want to be bothered with messing up, putting all that kind of stuff together, I could just install the ServiceNow IDE from the store directly onto my instance. And I'm kind of off to the races. I've already got like a fully bootstrapped environment for writing code.
This is awesome. I think this is really ushering in kind of this next new wave of development on ServiceNow. And now as well, frankly, this is the second release. So the ServiceNow SDK, as we know, officially kind of debuted in Washington. So now we have 2 full releases under our belt, which is where the products really start to gain momentum. So what are the biggest changes that people that got in early on Washington can expect from Xanadu, other than somehow magically y'all got the legal team to approve a fun name for a ServiceNow product that's not 18 words long? It's being called Fluent, like you said, which is like so exciting.
Yeah, that's right, Lauren. So we're excited about that as well. I'll say that the biggest changes coming are ServiceNow Fluent in particular. And what's so exciting about Fluent for us is that, and maybe I'll start by saying our philosophy in building these tools is that they are tools for developers by developers. And we want them to feel like home. We want the ServiceNow platform to feel like a comfortable home for folks who are used to working with source control and Git in particular, and using branch-based strategies for working collaboratively in teams. And Fluent is our domain-specific language. It's based on TypeScript. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, it's not all that different. You get some of the nice typing that comes along with TypeScript. And you don't have to really learn anything new if you already know TypeScript. So it's sort of the declarative piece of TypeScript where we allow you to define your application metadata as source code in Fluent as TypeScript. And what's really, really cool about this kind of being a declarative language for defining that application metadata, very much in the same way that you might use, say, YAML or JSON or another language to define your infrastructure as code, is that we know exactly how it's supposed to look. It's declarative. Once we build it, we have this definition of what your application should look like. And what that enables us to do is something that we think about as what we call bidirectional synchronization, or I think our documentation calls it two-way synchronization. And what we love about this is what I can do is go ahead and define, say, a table or an access control list or really any type of application metadata in Fluent as source code. I can build it and then see it directly on my instance in something like the ServiceNow IDE side by side. And then one of my teammates who might be using one of our other fantastic tools, say a builder, like let's say Patrick goes in and edits the business rule that I've defined in Fluent code, but he's using the platform form view to edit that business rule. Well, what's awesome about this is his changes will get translated to code for him so that we're working off of the same code base and we're both working from the same source of truth. So Patrick can work in whichever environment he wants on the platform. His changes will get pulled into code. And because I'm managing my code in Git and source control with my source control provider of choice, not the on-platform source control GitHub Enterprise integration, but if I want to use Bitbucket or GitHub or GitLab, or if I'm hosting on premises and going through mid-server, we support all of that stuff. That all works. So I get to use the tools of my choice that maybe I have selected or my company prefers to use. And we can work together that way and store everybody's changes in Git and get all of the niceness around working together and merging those changes, rolling them back if I don't like them, seeing the entire history of changes that were made. Bringing these kind of source control benefits to the ServiceNow development workflow is something that's really kind of near and dear to my heart and Patrick's heart. And that's why I say these are dev tools by devs for devs. And that's kind of the biggest thing that comes with the release of Xanadu. And of course, all of the ancillary tooling that's required around it. So what I mean by that is not only do we want you to be able to do this type of kind of fluent application development directly on your ServiceNow instance through the IDE, which has this really nice kind of integrated experience. I can build it right there in the tool and then bring it up side by side and see the implementation of what I just coded. But we also want to support folks who prefer to do this in their local dev environment, right? Like I might be running VS Code locally on my desktop, and I can use the SDK, which is packaged with this Fluent language, to build my applications offline. Like let's say I've got all of my favorite extensions in my own VS Code and things set up exactly the way that I want them with pretty colors that I like in my own themes. And I've got everything hooked into kind of my own CI/CD tools for testing, unit testing and deployment, et cetera. So for folks who prefer to do their development that way locally, we also have the VS Code extension, which is our ServiceNow Fluent language server, so that you get all of that same nice IntelliSense support for the Fluent language and syntax checking as I'm writing that code while I'm working offline. And I can use the command line interface that's provided as part of the software development kit or SDK to manage the connection to my instance, deploy my changes to my instance. And so theoretically, like I might be working locally with the SDK, Patrick might be working in the cloud on the IDE in his ServiceNow instance. We can be using the same Git repo and work together that way. We're really interested in providing flexibility for folks to use the tools that they already know and love for building applications on the Now platform.
And that is something that I think really showcases itself in the product. I've seen the demo that you're speaking to where someone has one version up in one window, someone has the other version up in the other window, and it showcases how quickly also those changes are rendered. And I think that one of the areas that ServiceNow has always had growth-wise is the ability to better enable team development. I think that's always been a very kind of obvious, you know, point for improvement that ServiceNow has. If anything, too, we were kind of suffering from our own success of like a lot of development shops having like one Uber developer that just did everything, right? That's how my old company worked. I mean, it was a ServiceNow development team of 2 or 1 half the time. And so that was a common model for a lot of companies. But now as ServiceNow has become this, multi-billion-dollar company, and similarly, our customers are using it to a much more vast extent. Having products like this IDE that have the flexibility to do things offline and do it in, Visual Studio, and have this flexibility for the ranging personas that developer teams are comprised of is so addictively exciting for me. In fact, I encourage y'all to be sure to check out the live streams, because that is demoed in those live streams specifically.
Yeah.
So hats off there.
And that's exactly why we're leaning into, Git-based source control for enabling like asynchronous collaboration between people, right? That's why we're leaning into another new feature that we're not here to talk about, but that is worth a mention, which is the ServiceNow developer sandboxes feature, capability that unlocks the ability for a team of developers to all work on the same instance, but in isolation from each other. Maybe everyone has the ServiceNow IDE booted up on all of those different sandboxes, and you're coordinating your changes through Git, right? Like this is exactly the problem you call out, Lauren, about like ServiceNow development teams are growing. They're bigger than they used to. When I started at the company, they were much smaller too, right? And but these teams are dozens, hundreds of people, at many of our customers, and all working on the same stuff. So we're spending a lot of time and effort in investing in what that next generation of development tooling and development capability needs to look like to enable those teams to be successful.
Well, speaking of the next wave of development tooling, very nice segue. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Similarly, are there any big changes in Xanadu with the IDE? Especially with this impending launch of the new ServiceNow Studio. Right off the heels of CreatorCon India, there was a lot of, especially because Studio's not out yet, right? Like it comes out when this episode is available, probably in a month or two later. But without them being out and the newly created Creator Studio, I think there's a lot of murmurings and confusion on who should be building what where. So do you have any clarity on what is kind of being targeted for these various new development environments?
Yeah, I think I can speak to this a bit. So outside looking in, I think that it might be quite confusing for folks that are kind of watching all the development in the service, like coming out of ServiceNow right now around, okay, we know that we have this like traditional studio product. This ServiceNow IDE thing came out a few months ago. This ServiceNow Studio thing is coming out. There's this Creator Studio thing. Like, there's a lot of there's a lot of places where I can be building out.
Said no one ever. Said no one ever on ServiceNow. There's a lot of studios.
Someone I don't know if I'm allowed to make jokes like this, but I'm going to anyway. Like, I saw someone post a comment on LinkedIn that in response to one of this, and it was that like DJ Khaled meme where he's saying like another one. Like, so I can speak to that a bit. Like, outside looking in, I think it seems a little bit like not quite sure what's happening. I think within the company, it's all laddering up to kind of a cohesive strategic vision under ServiceNow Studio. So the way I think about it, and the way that I'd encourage others to think about it, is that the fundamental thing that you're building, like an application on the ServiceNow platform, that's the same. That's the same across all of these different tools. What's different is how the type of UI, the type of interface, and the type of tooling you're given to work on that application. And what each of these different studios or different editor products bring is tooling catered to a particular type of user, a particular type of developer with a particular type of workflow. So you could think about it like the ServiceNow IDE, that's a tool for developers. This is a tool for folks that are writing code, want to manage code, want to use Git-based source control mechanisms, want to write fluent code to build their applications. And everything that we're working on is for that persona. It's for that person who's writing code, who's comfortable writing JavaScript and wants to do more of it. The ServiceNow Studio is targeting maybe a subtly different type of user. It's more of the maybe the user who's comfortable with the WYSIWYG builders that we have. This like great array of WYSIWYG builders that we have available in the ServiceNow ecosystem. Your UI builders, your flow designers, your good old forms and lists that have been with us for a long time, right? And folks who are really comfortable using that tooling. Maybe folks who are comfortable sticking with update sets. It's working for you, and you want to continue to use it. I think that's the kind of the target audience for ServiceNow Studio. Then there's Creator Studio, which you're building the same stuff, but it's at another level down. Maybe you're a business analyst or something, and you don't really want to have to learn all that much about ServiceNow app development at all. You just want to quickly get something up and going and then forget about it. And you want like really on rails, simple, like kind of wizard style flows for setting up, the kind of stuff like your service catalog items. Maybe you don't have to like do a bunch of custom development for some of those things. And that's Creator Studio. Strategically, we want all these things to come together. We want it all to kind of blend together, right? And that's why, as kind of a first pass, you'll be able to access any of these products through the ServiceNow Studio. And what we're kind of building up to in the future is seamless interoperability between all these different tools to unlock maybe diverse teams of different types of people who want different types of tooling for getting their job done the most effective way they can. Whether you're an IT developer or a software developer or a business analyst or whoever, there's a tool for you, and they all play well together. That's strategically what we're pursuing as a company.
Are there any upcoming white papers on organizing those types of teams, or like any best practices on how to manage the various different types of developers using the different types of studios?
What I'll say is that, to Patrick's point, we are bringing these experiences together. Part of the challenge here was that all of these products kind of launch on different timelines, and like maybe this is a little bit inside baseball, but I'll talk about it anyway. With Creator Studio coming out first, and then the ServiceNow IDE coming out next, and then finally the ServiceNow Studio. We plan to bring these things together and give folks the ability to kind of switch across the tool that they like, all sort of from within the same experience. And one of the things that we're doing as well is working closely across all of these teams to present a cohesive experience where some of the design elements are kind of exactly the same and shared across them, so that when I switch from, say, the IDE to ServiceNow Studio, the look and the feel and the experience and where the things are that I might want to interact with are kind of very much in the same place, laid out the same way, so that they kind of feel like an integrated product, for lack of a better word. And to the question around like, how do teams who use all of these different tools and have users of kind of different interests who may want to use Creator Studio, and then somebody else on the team who wants to use the IDE, for these folks to work together is certainly something that we hear a lot and is very important to us, as well as to our customers. So we're continually working through tools at a platform level to continually enable this. And as of right now, on the IDE side, one of the things that we ensure is that any changes made to an application scope that was created within the IDE and kind of in the near future here converted to be a Fluent application will be captured in source control. So kind of in that case where I mentioned Patrick maybe makes a change in, say, Creator Studio or ServiceNow Studio in the same scope that I'm working in within the IDE, those changes will get pulled into my code, and I'll be able to kind of commit them and manage them that way. I'd say kind of a much more future-facing approach here is some of the kind of larger platform tooling that we're working on around CI/CD pipelines and ensuring that kind of teams using source control and teams using update sets all kind of work from the same basis, and that these tools, to Patrick's point, interoperate really nicely. So that's some of the nice stuff to look forward to in the future. That's not kind of right around the corner, but that we're very cognizant of and working towards in the future here.
Well, that makes sense because all these products, I mean, I've only been working at ServiceNow for 7 years. And even in that amount of time, I've seen how many different product teams at one point or time or another own specific parts of the platform. And so, I hear from our customers all the time of like, oh, like, why don't they just like put all these things together and deploy XYZ here? Like it's it's a no-brainer. But I guess, like I said, it's a little bit inside baseball, but it's been very interesting to see, as someone in sales and someone that's not, or in marketing now and not on the product development team, the amount of Herculean effort it takes to not only build a successful product initially, but then kind of decide, where should it go? Should it be converged into something else? When new market trends appear, how does that pivot? The priorities on where that goes and how that appears. So seeing them all kind of come to this point of convergence and be on the cusp of that is very exciting, because it also just dictates how mature these products are becoming. They don't really do that inside ServiceNow until they've really hit a certain landmark, or at least from what I've seen. I'm just kind of speaking, from my point of view, but that all seemingly takes real mountains to be moved.
I'll mention as well that this presents some interesting kind of theoretical challenges that we work through. And what I mean by that is, given our paradigm for the IDE being kind of like, if you are familiar with VS Code, it should function exactly and look exactly like VS Code, so that it's not a jarring experience and I kind of know how to use everything that's there already. Whereas some of the other tools that we mentioned use I believe it's called the Horizon design system for a lot of the componentry to make it look really nice and really kind of ServiceNow. So some of the kind of, I'll say, cognitive dissonance that we have within the IDE is, well, how do we kind of fit in those experiences with the same look and feel of the other products within the IDE to kind of both present that cohesive and coherent experience across the platform, while at the same time maintaining the integrity of kind of the VS Code that I know and love. And maybe Patrick, you want to add a little bit to that?
Yeah, no, it is an interesting challenge, I think. Like, is probably the most I can say about that. Like, these kind of hybrid experiences where we have this like VS Code shell, and within it we're rendering content that wasn't necessarily built or designed to be rendered inside of VS Code in this way. It does present interesting, I think, engineering challenges. But I think the product that we shipped is a really good first stab at it. We'll continue to iterate on it over time and continue to make sure that, like, we want all of the sort of the benefits and like the cool tools and features and really useful tools that are already part of the platform. We want to make sure that those are made available in the ServiceNow IDE as much as possible. It brings with it other challenges too, like finding a way to kind of bridge the gap between the update set based sort of development workflow that ServiceNow folks are used to, and bridging the gap between that and a Git-based workflow where you're cutting builds off of Git branches and then deploying them to like the application repository for publishing into different instances. Like, they're different ways of working. They're different workflows altogether, like top-down workflows of building and shipping an app. That presents its own, I think, engineering challenges in figuring out, like, how do we build a bridge between these worlds, and how do we make sure that customers can kind of cross that bridge into a Git, like a source control through Git. Yeah, bridging that gap is one of the biggest challenges, I think, that we talk about all the time and that we've been working on for a while.
Yeah, how do you maintain the beloved flexibility of ServiceNow, but also still meet the needs that all those points of flexibility require? It seems like a engineering philosophical nightmare at times.
Yeah, and customers and partners have been building for ServiceNow in a particular way for a long time, and there's a lot of very hardened development processes built around that. And the ServiceNow IDE is coming in with, here's a different way of doing things potentially. And, how can we make sure, this is something I think about all the time, is how do we make sure that we can bring customers along for the ride on this? Very, very, very important for us, for the success of this product, just in general, is that people are able to use it. People don't look at it and say, oh, that's really neat, but I don't know how to use it. I don't know how to integrate it in my workflow, and then forget about it, right? That's one way that this doesn't work, is if that happens. So that's something that we spend a lot of time talking about.
Well, with all the murmurings I'm hearing about it online, I don't think it has any chance of being one of those left behind features of ServiceNow. It seems like this is the focal point. In fact, people at CreatorCon India were like, oh, why aren't they focusing more on this? I was like, well, I don't know how to break that to you, but some of it's still not out yet. So at the time, so very exciting, very exciting.
And to be clear, like, we are not letting off the gas pedal on any of this stuff. Where we have a big roadmap ahead of us of all sorts of things that we want to
Now
do
I've
to
got to
make
ask you
it
about
easier to
it.
adopt this?
Now
Yeah.
you forced my hand, and now I've got to ask you about it. So I guess, we're seeing where this exists for 2024 with Washington and Xanadu, two extremely successful, very feature rich releases for the IDE and the SDK. By the end of the alphabet, by the end of 2025, what is the goal we're striving for? You don't have to talk specifics, obviously, like safe harbor and all that jazz, but is there a specific goal in mind for where these products are headed?
I won't make any commitments on what we want to get to, but I'll talk about where we're trying to get to because some of these problems are really challenging. I'll kind of facetiously say that our philosophy here is like make it work, make it good, then make it fast. So in the make it work and make it good sections, really what we want to do is we want to remove adoption blockers. And by this, I mean some of the things that Patrick was talking about where customers have ways of working already with update sets, with different types of application scopes. And we try to be pretty transparent about the limitations of the IDE. So, one of the big things that we're more than aware of is that it doesn't yet support, as of today, converting my existing scoped applications to Fluent applications. The big things that we're working on that it doesn't yet support are global apps and app customizations. So we know that customers do a lot of work in these scopes, and not everybody's creating net new applications all the time. So the IDE really and the SDK really only kind of work in those situations for right now. And the purpose of that is to get these tools in the hands of customers as quickly as possible so that we can get feedback as we solve some of these bigger problems and make the experiences really good. So coming very soon here is the ability to convert existing applications. So if I've been working on a big application for many, many years, convert that to a Fluent app and then start to work on it in the IDE. So that starts to break down some of these adoption blockers. You kind of mentioned towards the end of the alphabet, this app customization and global scope problem is something that we're thinking very deeply about and want to solve for folks who want to work in this kind of Fluent driven source controlled way. There are lots of interesting nuances around how those applications work on the back end and kind of figuring out which pieces of application metadata belong to which scope and when to use A versus B. So we're trying to think about what's the best way to present that experience for our users so that folks who are doing development on those type of applications can also start doing so in the IDE. And then of course we have some of the things that I had maybe mentioned in passing, like around automating deployments and some of the other things that we're thinking about, maybe not in the by the end of the alphabet timeframe, but a little bit later, are the normal parts of my development workflow, like writing unit tests for my code and writing end-to-end integration tests are certainly things that we're thinking about, as well as like, well, how do I debug this source code? And if they were really simple, they'd be there. They're not, given that this is all kind of net new stuff and we have this sort of integrated experience, but we're thinking about ways to kind of present those common unit testing frameworks in a way where I can write those unit tests for my code as I've developed it, see if it works the way that I intend for it to. Integrate with ATF or automated test framework, one of the really cool features of the Now platform, to ensure that the metadata that I've created works end to end and surface some of that within the IDE. Thinking about how these theoretical CI/CD pipelines will work and kicking off a build that will go through my deployment pipeline and run all the tests and scans and all of that. And at the same time, kind of pulling back opportunities to either optimize my Fluent code or figure out where there might be a break in my application by stepping through a debugging experience. These are all things that we're working on that are kind of tricky problems, and we sort of need to come up with innovative net new approaches to how we're actually going to do this in a way that continues to maintain that sort of two-way synchronization for the Fluent language and integrates nicely with all of these other tools that we mentioned. So huge plans for the roadmap. We're not going to get all the things I mentioned in by the end of the alphabet, I promise you that, but just giving folks a look at sort of what's important to us and really enabling folks who might look at the IDE and say, oh, that's awesome, but I can't use it today for reasons X, Y, and Z. Well, we want to remove those X, Y, and Z reasons and make it so that the IDE does support this. And maybe I'll give a quick example. We had a customer who was using the IDE come to us and say, hey, it'd be really cool if I could, in my table, as I'm defining it in Fluent code, provide a label, because I'm building end user applications for folks that are fluent, not in the ServiceNow language sense, but in like the bilingual sense, for folks that are bilingual to actually use these applications. And it kind of sucks that I have to define this stuff twice. I have to define it first in English and then in French. And as of today, we shipped an update to the table API where there's a label parameter, and I can label my languages and have a label for my column that's in English and then in whatever other language of my choosing. And that's just two separate lines right there in my code, and I don't have to duplicate the work. And so this is just an example of like stuff where customers come to us and they say, hey, it'd be really cool if you support this. The easy stuff that we can do, we get it in really quickly. And the harder stuff, we're working on it simultaneously in the background because we really want this to be a fantastic experience for folks.
And by the way, like these customer engagements that we get where we hear about these ideas, there's not like a formal process that you have to go through to do this. Like a lot of times this is someone sent like me or Jay a LinkedIn message or like emailed somebody or posted on our like support board or something. And that's how these conversations get started. So like, and I'm saying that as in like just an open call. We love hearing from people about, especially why you can't use these tools yet and what you'd want us to do so that you can use them. We love hearing about that stuff.
That is a monkey's paw wish, Patrick. I just hope you know what you're asking for. When that's
a different answer in 3 years once we have 100,000 customers. But this is we're very available. Jay and I are. So,
that's awesome. I mean, obviously, and I really appreciate your transparency too about where this product is going. It's very interesting to see the development strategy. I love that statement of like, make it work, make it good, make it fast. And I think that shows like you bust out as many things as humanly possible in 2024 of like, here's all the things we can get on the table to get this into the hands of customers as fast as possible. And then prioritize the bigger items also for 2025. So I love that.
So I want to codify Patrick's commitment. I think we have show notes. So in the show notes, we'll put links to our community forum where you can post questions, and me and Patrick and our engineers keep an eye on this, and we answer your questions, as do other experts in the community. So this is a great way to engage with us, get your questions answered, have some discourse there from experts in the community about the best way to do something. We also will be posting updates to a different forum where we kind of have blog posts about how to work with particular features and functions like Git authentication. That's one of the things that's coming out today for the SDK is SSO via OAuth 2 to your ServiceNow instance as you're authenticating with the SDK. So that's kind of one of those adoption blockers that it's super exciting. We want everybody to be able to use this stuff. So this is the type of work that we're doing, but we post the patch notes for the SDK and fluent language in that forum. So if you want to keep an eye on that, we'll have blog posts and all the patch notes there. And then also, as Patrick mentioned, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or via email. We can put our emails in the show notes as well. Happy to do that. And then lastly, we're going to start doing public office hours. If you want to get on a call with us and ask us anything you want or have us help you work through problems that you might be having with the IDE, with the SDK, with the fluent language, every 2 weeks, I believe it's going to be Mondays at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We'll be there to answer your questions, to help you work with some of this tooling. You can hop in, ask whatever you want. So want to put that out there as well, that we're very committed to receiving your feedback. We prioritize it. We want this stuff to be awesome for you. Like we use it, so we see what we like and what we don't like, and that's obvious to us, but customers use this stuff in a lot of different ways, and there are some things that we may not have thought about that we want to hear about.
The gauntlet has been thrown, ladies and gentlemen. There is literally no excuse to learning the SDK between all these options. Definitely want to see a lot of more interest online and digging into this. Specifically, one final question. Like I said, I've been hearing a lot of murmurings, a lot of people wanting to get their hands on the SDK, on the IDE, start learning more. Aside from all the amazing resources that you've already provided, is there an opportunity for customers to get their hands dirty in this software soon-ish?
I mean, best way is to download it and try it out, right? So it's available on the ServiceNow store. The SDK is available on NPM. You can reference the ServiceNow docs for that. We'll make sure that that gets linked. You can easily install it on your machine, start playing with it. The VS Code extension for Fluent, which you can use in conjunction with the SDK, is available on the VS Code marketplace. We got stuff all over the place. It's all available. It's all ready to be used. And in terms of like more like hands-on maybe experience with it, they haven't released like the knowledge or creator con schedules or anything, so I'm not quite sure where things are going to land, but rest assured a bunch of us will be there, and we'll be there talking about all of these things in person. I wish I had sessions to plug. We haven't released the sessions yet, but we will tell you about those sessions as soon as we have them available, as soon as we know what's happening and where it's happening. But rest assured, we will be at CreatorCon ready to talk to you. So you can talk to us there too.
Love it. Cannot wait. May could not come fast enough. I am so excited. Gentlemen, this has been fantastic. I cannot thank you enough for joining us again here today on Breakpoint. It is so appreciated how plugged in you are as leaders of product here at ServiceNow, and your transparency, your enthusiasm for these products. It means not only a lot to me, but to everyone listening. And we cannot wait to have y'all back in Yokohama and beyond.
I want to be here every release. Can we do that?
Heck yeah. That's
Awesome.
A promise from me. You can have them back every release. As long as there's still cool stuff coming out, you can come back.
Okay, we'll keep making cool stuff just so we can come back.
That's good carrot for us.
Carrot, not stick. Well, thank you so much, wonderful listener, for joining us here today. Don't forget to check out ServiceNow's other podcasts. You can find them, a little oddly enough, at servicenow.com/community under the events menu for one reason or another. Subscribe to this podcast for free to get it automatically sent to you where any podcast auditorially can be found, as well as the ServiceNow Dev Program YouTube channel. Breakpoint is brought to you by ServiceNow with executive producer me, Lauren McManaman. And to find out more about the ServiceNow Developer Program, please head to developer.servicenow.com. Again, thank y'all so much for joining us here. Stay hungry, stay humble, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Please let us know what you think about this podcast. You can leave feedback or ask questions in the ServiceNow community. For more great information on ServiceNow development, check out the ServiceNow Developer Portal at developer.servicenow.com. Thanks for listening.
The ServiceNow SDK and the IDE, those are really the two major...
Oh, God, I just hit remove. Oh, my God, no, I meant to hit switch. Oh, my God, I'm sorry. I tried to highlight your video and I hit remove. I'm so sorry.
Lauren said, that's enough out of you, Patrick. You're out of here. There's no 3 strikes rule with Lauren.
Jay, your turn.
Sorry, all right.
Jay, if you don't answer that right, you're going to get removed too. That's...
I'm going to behave.
It didn't even ask to confirm. It was just like, bye.
Yeah, so...
How have I done this twice? I'm so sorry. At least I caught it right before.
We're good.
It's all good. You should leave this stuff in. You
That's
need
right.
a blooper reel or something.
Well, this will be the blooper for the short or whatever I used to promo it. So how many times did Lord Fat finger the remove button?